Acts. Chapter 22. Men, brothers and fathers, hear my defense which I now make to you. And when they heard that he addressed them in the Hebrew dialect, they became more quiet. And he said, I am a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city and trained at the feet of Gamaliel, according to the strictness of the law of our fathers, being zealous for God, even as you all are today. And I persecuted this way unto death, binding and delivering to prisons both men and women. As also the high priest and all the assembly of the elders testify for me, from whom I also received letters to the brothers and went to Damascus to bring those also who were there bound to Jerusalem that they might be punished. And as I journeyed and drew near to Damascus about midday, suddenly a great light flashed out of heaven around me. And I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And I answered, Who are you, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus the Nazarene, whom you persecute. And those who were with me beheld the light, but did not hear the voice of the one who was speaking to me. And I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, Rise up and go into Damascus, and there it will be told to you concerning all the things which have been appointed to you to do. And as I could not see because of the glory of that light, I was led by the hand by those who were with me and came into Damascus. And a certain Ananias, a devout man according to the law, well attested to by all the Jews dwelling there, came to me, and standing by, said to me, Brother Saul, receive your sight. And in that very hour I looked up at him. And he said, The God of our fathers has previously appointed you to know his will and to see the righteous one and to hear the voice from his mouth. For you will be a witness to him unto all men of the things which you have seen and heard. And now, why do you delay? Rise up and be baptized and wash away your sins, calling on his name. And when I returned to Jerusalem and was praying in the temple, I went into a trance. And I saw him saying to me, Hurry, and go quickly out of Jerusalem, because they will not accept your testimony concerning me. And I said, Lord, they know that I was imprisoning and beating from synagogue to synagogue those who believe on you. And when the blood of your witness Stephen was being shed, I myself also was standing by and approving and keeping the garments of those who did away with him. And he said to me, Go, for I will send you forth far away to the Gentiles. And they listened to him up to this word, and then they lifted up their voice, saying, Away from the earth with such a man, for it is not fitting for him to live. And as they were crying out and casting off their garments and throwing dust in the air, the commander ordered him to be brought into the barracks, saying that he should be examined by scourging in order that he might ascertain for what cause they were shouting against him so. But as they stretched him out with the thongs, Paul said to the centurion standing by, Is it lawful for you to scourge a man who is a Roman and uncondemned? And when the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and reported, saying, What are you about to do? For this man is a Roman. And the commander came and said to him, Tell me, are you a Roman? And he said, Yes. And the commander answered, With a large sum of money I acquired this citizenship. And Paul said, But I was even born a Roman. Immediately therefore those who were about to examine him withdrew from him, and the commander also was afraid, realizing that he was a Roman and that he had bound him. And on the next day he, intending to find out for certain why he was accused by the Jews, released him and ordered the chief priests and all the Sanhedrin to come together, and having brought Paul down, he had him stand before them. Acts. Chapter 23. And Paul, looking intently at the Sanhedrin, said, Men, brothers, I have conducted myself in all good conscience before God until this day. And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. And do you sit to judge me according to the law, and contrary to the law you order me to be struck? And those standing by said, Do you revile the high priest of God? And Paul said, I did not know, brothers, that he is the high priest, for it is written, You shall not speak evilly of the ruler of your people. And Paul, knowing that one part was Sadducees and the other Pharisees, cried out in the Sanhedrin, Men, brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees, concerning the hope and resurrection of the dead I am being judged. And when he spoke this, a dissension took place between the Pharisees and Sadducees, and the multitude was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, neither angel or spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. And there was a great outcry, and some of the scribes of the Pharisees' party rose up and contended, saying, We find nothing evil in this man. And what if a spirit has spoken to him, or an angel? And when much dissension had taken place, the commander, fearing that Paul might be torn to pieces by them, ordered the detachment of soldiers to go down and seize him from their midst and bring him into the barracks. But in the night following, the Lord stood by him and said, Take courage, for as you have solemnly testified to the things concerning me in Jerusalem, so also you must testify in Rome. And when it became day, the Jews formed a plot and put themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink until they had killed Paul. And there were more than 40 who swore to this conspiracy. They came to the chief priests and the elders and said, We have bound ourselves with a curse to taste nothing until we kill Paul. Now therefore you, with the Sanhedrin, notify the commander to bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine more accurately the things concerning him, and we, before he draws near, are ready to do away with him. But the son of Paul's sister heard of the ambush, and he came and entered into the barracks and reported it to Paul. And Paul called one of the centurions to him and said, Bring this young man to the commander, for he has something to report to him. So he took him and brought him to the commander and said, The prisoner Paul called me to him and asked me to bring this young man to you, because he has something to tell you. And the commander took him by the hand and, withdrawing privately, inquired, What is it that you have to report to me? And he said, The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down tomorrow to the Sanhedrin, as though they were going to inquire somewhat more accurately concerning him. So you should not be persuaded by them, for more than 40 of their men are lying in ambush for him, they have put themselves under a curse neither to eat nor to drink until they have done away with him. And now they are ready, awaiting the promise from you. So the commander dismissed the young man, charging him, Do not tell anyone that you have informed me of these things. And he called to him a certain 2 of the centurions and said, Prepare 200 soldiers to go as far as Caesarea, as well as 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen, by the 3rd hour of the night. And they were also to provide mounts to put Paul on and bring him safely to Felix the governor. And he wrote a letter having this form. Claudius Lysias, to his excellency, Governor Felix, rejoice. This man, having been seized by the Jews and about to be done away with by them, I came upon with my detachment of soldiers and rescued, when I learned that he was a Roman. And intending to ascertain the cause for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their Sanhedrin. And found him to be accused concerning questions of their law, but having nothing worthy of death or of bonds laid to his charge. And when it was disclosed to me that there was a plot against the man, I sent him at once to you, charging the accusers also to speak the things against him before you. So the soldiers, according to what they had been directed, took up Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. And on the next day, leaving the horsemen to depart with him, they returned to the barracks. And when they entered into Caesarea and handed over the letter to the governor, they presented Paul also to him. And when he had read it, he asked from what province he was, and learning that he was from Cilicia. He said, I will hear your case fully when your accusers also arrive. And he ordered him to be guarded in Herod's praetorium. Acts. Chapter 24. And after 5 days the high priest Ananias came down with some elders and a certain orator, Tertullus, and they gave their information against Paul to the governor. And when Paul was called, Tertullus began to accuse him saying, Since we have obtained much peace through you, and since reforms are being carried out for this nation through your forethought, both in every way and everywhere, we welcome it, most excellent Felix, with all thankfulness. But that I may not detain you further, I entreat you to hear us briefly in your forbearance. For we have found this man a pest and an agitator of insurrections among all the Jews throughout the inhabited earth and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, who has also tried to profane the temple. Him also we laid hold of and wanted to judge according to our law. But Lysias the commander came by and with much force took him away from our hands, and ordered his accusers to come to you. When you have examined this man yourself concerning all these things, you will be able to ascertain from him the things which we accuse him of." And the Jews also joined in the attack, affirming that these things were so. And when the governor nodded for him to speak, Paul answered, "Knowing that for many years you have been a judge to this nation, I gladly make my defense for the things concerning myself. Since you can realize that it is not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem. And neither in the temple did they find me disputing with anyone nor stirring up a crowd, nor in the synagogues, nor throughout the city. Neither are they able to prove to you the things which they now accuse me of. But I confess this to you, that according to the way, which they call a sect, so I serve the God of our fathers, believing all the things that are written in the law and in the prophets. Having hope toward God, which these themselves also look for, that there is to be a resurrection of both the righteous and the unrighteous. Because of this I also exercise myself to always have a conscience without offense toward God and men. Now after many years I came bringing alms to my nation and offerings. In which they found me purified in the temple, with no crowd or uproar. But certain Jews from Asia, who should have been present before you and made accusation if they had anything against me. Or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the Sanhedrin. Other than concerning this one sound which I cried out while standing among them, concerning the resurrection of the dead I am being judged today before you. But Felix, knowing more accurately the things concerning the way, deferred them, saying, When Lysias the commander comes down, I will determine your affairs. And he directed the centurion to keep him in custody, and that he should have some liberty and that no one should prevent his own people from attending to him. But after some days, Felix arrived with Drusilla his wife, who was a Jewess, and he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ Jesus. And as he was reasoning concerning righteousness and self-control and the judgment to come, Felix became afraid and answered, Go for the present, and when I have an opportunity, I will call for you. Hoping at the same time also that money would be given to him by Paul. Therefore he also sent for him more frequently and conversed with him. And when 2 years were completed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and wanting to gain favor with the Jews, Felix left Paul bound. Acts. Chapter 25. Festus therefore, having come into the province, after 3 days went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. And the chief priests and leading men of the Jews gave their information to him against Paul, and they entreated him, asking for a favor against him, that he would summon him to Jerusalem, they themselves setting an ambush to do away with him on the way. Festus therefore answered that Paul was being kept in custody in Caesarea, and that he himself was about to proceed there shortly. Therefore, he said, Let influential men from among you go down with me, and if there is anything wrong in the man, let them accuse him. And having stayed among them not more than 8 or 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and on the next day he sat on the judgment seat and ordered Paul to be brought. And when he arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many serious charges against him, which they were not able to prove. While Paul said in his defense, Neither against the law of the Jews nor against the temple nor against Caesar have I sinned in anything. But Festus, wanting to gain favor with the Jews, answered Paul and said, Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and be judged there before me concerning these things? And Paul said, I am standing before Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. I have done nothing wrong to the Jews, as you also very well know. If therefore I am doing wrong and have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die, but if there is nothing to the things which these accuse me of, no one can hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. Then when Festus had conferred with the council, he answered, To Caesar you have appealed, to Caesar you shall go. Now when some days had passed, Agrippa the king and Bernice arrived at Caesarea and greeted Festus. And while they were staying some additional days there, Festus laid before the king the matters regarding Paul, saying, There is a certain man who has been left a prisoner by Felix. Concerning whom, when I was in Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews gave information and asked for a sentence against him. To them I answered that it is not the custom with Romans to hand over any man before he who is accused meets the accusers face to face and has an opportunity for a defense concerning the charge. So when they had come together here, I made no delay. On the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, I ordered the man to be brought. Concerning him the accusers stood and brought no charge of the evil things I was suspecting. But they had certain questions against him concerning their own religion and concerning a certain Jesus who had died, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. And being at a loss as to how there should be an inquiry concerning these things, I asked him if he was willing to go to Jerusalem and be judged there concerning these things. But when Paul appealed to be kept in custody for the decision of the emperor, I ordered him to be kept in custody until I should send him up to Caesar. And Agrippa said to Festus, I myself also would like to hear the man. Tomorrow, said Festus, you shall hear him. Therefore on the next day, when Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp and entered into the hall of audience together with the commanders and prominent men of the city, and when Festus had given the order, Paul was brought. And Festus said, King Agrippa, and all you men who are present with us, you behold this man, concerning whom all the multitude of Jews have petitioned me, both in Jerusalem and here, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. But I found that he had done nothing worthy of death, and since he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to send him. Concerning him I have nothing definite to write to my lord, therefore I have brought him before you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that when the examination has taken place, I may have something to write. For it seems unreasonable to me, in sending a prisoner, not to also signify the charges against him.